A total of 27 combat engagements occurred between Ukrainian defense forces and Russian occupying troops on the 28th of July. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 6 o'clock on the 29th of July. Quote: The Russian Federation launched a missile strike on the city of Dnipro yesterday, the 28th of July, using 2 Iskander-M ballistic missiles. Besides, the enemy conducted 11 airstrikes and carried out 38 attacks from multiple launch rocket systems on the positions of our troops and populated areas. Unfortunately, there were civilian fatalities, and residential buildings and other civilian and administrative infrastructure were severely damaged. The threat of missile and air strikes across Ukraine remains high. 27 combat engagements took place over the last 24 hours. Details: The operational situation on the Volyn and Polissia fronts remains much the same as before. No evidence of offensive group formation has been reported. On the Severshina and Slobozhanshina fronts, Russian forces carried out airstrikes in and around the area of the settlements of Holohanivka and Leonivka in Chernihiv Oblast and Iskander-M and Volyn in Sumy Oblast. They launched mortar and artillery attacks on over 20 settlements, including Ivashki, Harivka-Zakok, Yudy, Streleka, Zelin and Okremivka in Kharkiv Oblast. On the Kupiansk front, the Russian army delivered an airstrike in the area of the settlement of Druzhelyubivka in Kharkiv Oblast. The settlements of Kolodyazne, Vorokna, Zapadna, Sinkivka and Kyslivka in Kharkiv Oblast came under Russian artillery and mortar fire. On the Lyman front, the Russian troops held offensive actions in the area in and around Serebryanka Forest and the village of Bilohorivka in Luhansk Oblast, but to no avail. They conducted an airstrike in the vicinity of the settlement of Horohorivka in Donetsk Oblast. The Russians deployed artillery to attack the settlements of Nevsky and Bilohorivka in Luhansk Oblast, and Torsky, Verkhnekamiansk and Spern in Donetsk Oblast. On the Bakhmut front, over 15 settlements suffered from Russian artillery strikes, in particular, Minkivka, Bodanivka, Chasev Yar, Ivanovsky, Predtekine, and Bila Hora in Donetsk Oblast. On the Avdiivka front, the Russian forces launched an airstrike in the area of Avdiivka. Over 10 settlements came under artillery fire, particularly Avdiivka, Pervomaisk and Karlivka in Donetsk Oblast. On the Marinka front, the Ukrainian defense forces continue holding back the Russian offensive in the area of the city of Marinka. The Russian army fired on over 10 settlements, particularly Krasnohorivka, Marinka, Novomykhailivka, Pobeda and Georgivka in Donetsk Oblast. On the Shatarsk front, the Russian troops struck the settlements of Odradna, Blahodatna, Makarivka, Zelin Pol and Novodorivka in Donetsk Oblast. On the Zaporizhia and Kherson front, the Russian forces are focusing their primary efforts on preventing further advance of Ukrainian troops. Over 25 settlements came under artillery fire, particularly Chervon, Huliaipol, Charivny, Novoandriivka and Stepov in Zaporizhia Oblast, and Zoloda Balka, Mykhailivka, Kozatsky, Tyainka, Ivanivka and Sadov in Kherson Oblast. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian defense forces maintained their offensive on the Melitopol and Berdyansk fronts, consolidating their positions, inflicting artillery fire on identified Russian targets, and carrying out counter-battery measures. The Ukrainian Air Force launched 3 airstrikes on the clusters of Russian personnel, weapons and military equipment over the past 24 hours. Ukrainian rocket forces and artillery destroyed 8 Russian artillery pieces at firing positions, 2 electronic warfare systems, an ammunition storage point, and a fuel and lubricant warehouse. Putin missiles hit Dnipro apartment block as children injured. Russian missiles have hit an apartment block in a Ukrainian security service building in Dnipro, leaving 2 children injured, officials have said. President Vladimir Putin's forces injured at least 9 people, including 2 teenagers aged between 14 and 17, in the strike on the central city on Friday evening, according to Serhiy Lysyk, the head of the region's military administration. Dnipro Mayor Boris Filatov said it was the 3rd time the SBU security service building had been targeted. Both buildings were largely empty, the residential building because it had just been completed and units were being put up for sale. Pictures posted on social media showed part of one building reduced to rubble and debris strewn across a large courtyard. Russia says it does not target civilian sites. Its troops have intensified evening and nighttime missile attacks on a variety of targets, focusing in particular on port facilities around the city of Odessa after Moscow pulled out of an agreement allowing grain shipments from Ukraine's ports. Meanwhile, Kyiv has made progress in driving back Russian troops, the commander on the southern front said on Friday, as its counteroffensive appears to be ramping up. Ukraine uses North Korean rockets to blast Russian forces, report says. Ukrainian soldiers have been observed using North Korean rockets which they claim were seized by a friendly country before reaching Ukraine, according to a new report. Ukraine's defense ministry suggested the arms were captured from the Russians, the Financial Times reported on Saturday. The U.S. has accused North Korea of providing arms to Russia, including alleged shipments by sea, but North Korea and Russia deny conducting arms transactions. The North Korean weapons were shown by Ukrainian troops operating Soviet-era Grad multiple-launch rocket systems near the destroyed eastern city of Bakhmut, the site of lengthy, brutal fighting, the report said. Earlier this week, Russia's defense minister Sergei Shoigu had made a rare visit to Pyongyang to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the end of the Korean War, the first visit by Moscow's top defense official since the 1991 breakup of the Soviet Union. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces reported on July 29 that Russia has lost 245,220 troops in Ukraine since February 24 last year. This number includes 390 casualties suffered by Russian forces over the past day.